I should have seen it coming. We all should have. But we were too busy looking at the stars, imagining what was out there, hoping for peace. We never realized how dangerous our curiosity was. Humanity's greatest strength, our relentless pursuit of knowledge, would become our most terrifying weapon. And by the time the universe realized its mistake, it was already too late. It all began innocently enough. A dream shared by every civilization that had ever risen from the ashes of their homeworld to explore. We were explorers by nature, driven by an insatiable thirst to see beyond our own sky, to reach the stars. It was never about conquest at first. We were drawn to the great unknown, as any young species would be, eager to prove we were worthy of the cosmos. The first breakthrough came with the lucid star. It wasn't much by the standards of the ancient races we would soon encounter, just a starship capable of breaking the speed of light, a small leap in the history of humankind. But to us, it was monumental. The moment we sent our ship beyond the edge of our solar system, we believed we had unlocked the universe's deepest secrets. We thought we would meet new friends, trade knowledge, and live in harmony with the other civilizations scattered throughout the galaxy. It never occurred to us that the universe wasn't just a place of awe and wonder. It was also a place of danger, where not all species were as welcoming or as peaceful as we imagined. At first, the signs were subtle. The silence, the galaxies beyond our reach, unexplored and untapped. We sent probes hoping to learn from the stars, but all we encountered were empty, vast stretches of nothing. Then came the radio signals patterns, strange and artificial, that we could not decipher. Some of them were clearly warnings, while others seemed indifferent. We sent more ships, we sent more signals. And yet, the silence persisted. For every discovery we made, the void grew deeper. But we were not discouraged. We were humans, after all. We believed that if we just kept pushing, kept reaching, the universe would eventually open up to us. After all, we were explorers. We had survived centuries of wars, diseases, and disasters to get to this point. What could possibly stop us now? That was the mistake we made. We had no idea that our persistence would one day become a problem. The first real encounter came much sooner than we expected. The signal came in the middle of a quiet night, broadcast on frequencies we hadn't even known existed. It was a message from the Galactic Council, an ancient federation of intelligent species. The message was clear, though cloaked in formality: do not interfere with the established order. The galaxy is not your playground. At first, we thought it was some sort of joke. We had only just sent our first exploratory ship beyond our own solar system. What could we possibly have done to deserve such a stern warning? But as time passed, we realized the message was not just a warning. It was a threat. At first, we tried to brush it off. After all, who were these beings to dictate how we explored the stars? We were not their subjects. The arrogance of humanity, that stubborn pride that had fueled our survival for so long, pushed us forward. We began to send more ships, more messages. We began to make contact with species, some of which were thrilled to see us, but others were not. And then came the first sign of something darker, something much darker. A ship, not of our making, appeared on the edges of our solar system. No warning, no communication, just a presence watching us. We were at the mercy of an alien species we hadn't even known existed, one that was far older and far more powerful than anything we could imagine. The first thought that crossed my mind was fear. But the second thought, the one that still chills me to this day, was this: they had already judged us. We had already made our mark, and the universe wasn't ready for us. It didn't take long before the first skirmish erupted. The Council's ships appeared, as if summoned by some unseen force, demanding we halt our exploration. And that was the moment we began to realize something horrifying: humans were not just a new species entering the cosmic fold. We were a threat. An unknown force that the galaxy would soon learn to fear. And by the time the universe realized its mistake, it was already too late. The fire was lit. We were no longer just explorers. We were something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. We were young then, a new species emerging from the cradle of Earth. Other civilizations in the galaxy saw us as primitive, volatile, naive, caught somewhere between the instincts of our animal ancestors and the aspirations of a future we could hardly comprehend. Our technology had barely reached the stars, our society still marked by the scars of conflict and struggle. But there was something about us, something raw, that the universe couldn't ignore. And those who had been watching us from the edges of space had already begun to form judgments. They were right, of course. We weren't like the other species. We were something different. The first time we encountered the Galactic Council, we thought it would be the beginning of an era of cooperation, of shared knowledge. A chance to exchange ideas with species far older and wiser than us, who had already mastered the secrets of the stars. We had no idea how wrong we were. The Council was ancient, an alliance of races that had formed in the depths of time, their origins obscured by millennia of history. They governed vast regions of space, maintaining a fragile peace among countless worlds. They thought they understood the universe, its rhythms, its order. They believed that life should follow a certain path, that progress should be measured, controlled, guided by those who had seen more, learned more, lived longer. And they were watching us with wary eyes, calculating our potential, and they did not like what they saw. The first message came as a warning. A transmission sent through a frequency we had never even thought to scan, an impersonal set of coordinates. At first, we thought it was just a formality. We had just launched our first ships beyond our solar system. Surely this was just the usual diplomatic routine, a simple form of introduction to a larger community. But as the message continued, something about it felt off. The words weren't hostile, but the tone was cold, distant. "Do not provoke us," it said. "The galaxy is not your playground." We were confused. We hadn't done anything yet. Our ships were only beginning to explore the nearby star systems, mapping and gathering data. We hadn't even encountered anyone beyond the edges of our own knowledge. How could we possibly have provoked anyone? The arrogance of that warning felt strange to us, but we dismissed it as the overcaution of an older, more established race. They had to understand, didn't they? We were just beginning. We were explorers, we meant no harm. But it wasn't long before we learned that they didn't see it that way. The Council's warning was more than a plea for caution, it was a declaration. They saw us as a potential threat. To them, humanity was a species not yet ready for the stars, a child stumbling through the darkness of space without the maturity to understand its dangers. To them, we were unpredictable, reckless, full of untamed potential they couldn't control. The moment we broke the light-speed barrier, we crossed a line they had drawn centuries ago, a line they believed no species should cross until they had proven themselves worthy. They saw us as a danger, and in their eyes, the universe had no room for another wild, uncontrollable force. We weren't a civilization to be nurtured. We were an inconvenience at best, a disaster waiting to happen at worst. They tried to slow us down. They tried to direct us, sending more messages, more threats, trying to make us understand that we had to follow their rules, abide by their peace. But it was too late. Humanity, driven by our need to prove ourselves, was already moving too fast. We had tasted the stars, and we weren't going to stop. Our ships didn't just explore, they began to build. Our colonies expanded. Our technology advanced exponentially, and all the while, the Council watched from afar, hoping we would stumble, waiting for us to make a mistake. What they didn't understand was that humans don't back down. When faced with obstacles, we don't falter. We find a way. And that, in the end, would be our greatest weapon. We had never been one to follow the rules. And now, as we ventured further into the galaxy, it seemed the universe itself would have to adapt to us, not the other way around. We thought it was a joke at first, this warship the humans had been working on in secret. But then we saw it. Vanguard was its name, a sleek, imposing vessel that seemed to hum with an energy we couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of everything humanity had become, a declaration of our arrival in the cosmos, and it wasn't built for exploration or diplomacy. It was designed for one thing: power. The moment we laid eyes on it, we knew the balance of the galaxy had shifted. At first, the lucid star had been our crowning achievement, the first ship capable of faster than light travel, a proud symbol of human ingenuity. But Vanguard was different. It wasn't about exploration. It was a statement. A ship built not just to navigate the stars, but to dominate them. It wasn't just the size of Vanguard that struck fear into the hearts of the Galactic Council, it was the sheer audacity behind its design. Humanity had always been known for thinking outside the box, for solving problems in ways that others found too unconventional. But this ship was a leap even beyond that. It was engineered using a combination of technologies never seen before: hybridized energy systems that could manipulate gravitational fields, weapons that bent the very fabric of space itself, and shields that could absorb and redirect energy with terrifying precision. No one had ever built anything like it. No one had even imagined it. The first time Vanguard tested its weapons, the results were catastrophic. A single pulse shot out from its core, and in an instant, a small moon, one of the many orbiting a distant gas giant, was reduced to nothing. Not even debris remained. It was as though the moon had never existed. The Council scouts, who had been observing us from a distance, immediately relayed the message: Vanguard was capable of destroying entire worlds with a single strike. The Council didn't know whether to be terrified or impressed. And so, the first real conflict began. It didn't take long for the Council to send representatives to us. They tried to keep their tone diplomatic, but beneath the surface was the unmistakable tension of power plays and threats. "We warned you," they said. "You were not ready for this. Your technology is not something the galaxy will tolerate." But what they failed to understand was that humanity wasn't interested in tolerance. We didn't want to be pacified or controlled. The Vanguard was not just a ship, it was a declaration of independence, a rejection of the Council's so-called peace. The moment their diplomats arrived in our space, we made it clear that we were not their subjects. We were not a new species to be controlled. We had not come to ask permission to exist in the galaxy, we had come to stake our claim. Their warnings only fueled our resolve. Every speech, every threat only pushed us further from their grasp. The first battle was more of a skirmish, but it was enough to demonstrate the difference in our resolve. The Council sent their fleet to challenge Vanguard, thinking that their numbers would overwhelm us. They were wrong. Our ship, though only one, tore through their forces with surgical precision. Their ships were faster, more agile, but they were no match for the firepower we wielded. The battle lasted only hours, but by the end of it, we had crippled their fleet, sending a clear message: humanity was not to be underestimated. The Council was stunned. For centuries, they had maintained peace by managing the power balance. They had convinced themselves that they were the unquestioned authority of the galaxy. But now, they realized they were no longer in control. A species they had thought of as insignificant had just obliterated their best and brightest. And we weren't stopping. From that moment, humanity was no longer just a curiosity in the galaxy. We were a force. And the universe, in all its vastness, was about to learn just how dangerous it could be when we were pushed too far. What the Council had failed to see was that we didn't just build ships, we built power. And power, when wielded by humanity, had a way of changing everything. The war wasn't about land or resources, it never was. It was about dominance, about proving that we belonged. And the universe quickly learned that humans weren't interested in being a subject to anyone. If we had to carve our place out of the stars, we would. The first few skirmishes had been small. But once Vanguard had torn through the Council's fleet, the full scale of humanity's ambition became undeniable. We were no longer interested in merely defending ourselves. We were building an empire, and we would stop at nothing to see it rise. It didn't take long for the other races in the galaxy to pick sides. Some, like the Lornathi, an insectoid species with a brutal reputation, recognized the power in humanity and aligned with us. They saw our defiance as a sign of strength, an echo of their own violent history, and they saw the potential for a new alliance. Others, like the Kithar, a race of elegant, telepathic beings, recoiled in horror, fearful of what our rise meant. They had long believed that the key to peace was restraint, that only the most disciplined and enlightened species deserved to wield true power. They had no place for us in their vision of the future. And then there were those in the middle, the neutral systems, those that had long since distanced themselves from galactic conflicts, choosing instead to live in isolation. They thought they could remain untouched. They were wrong. We reached out to them, not with diplomacy, but with force. They couldn't ignore us any longer, not with Vanguard prowling their borders, not with the message we had sent clear and strong we were here to stay. We didn't need to conquer every world, we needed only to carve out a network of systems to show that we were capable of overwhelming any resistance. In some places, we took planets by force, reducing them to ash before the Council had time to react. In others, we employed subtler methods, covert operations, subverting local governments, spreading propaganda. We didn't just want to rule, we wanted to reshape the galaxy in our image. Our power was undeniable, but it was our will that was unstoppable. The real turning point came when we set our sights on the star system known as Lystra. Lystra was a hub, a point of connection between several important galactic trade routes. It was home to millions of beings, many of whom had no interest in taking sides in the war. But we knew that whoever controlled Lystra controlled the gateway to power. And we weren't going to let that slip from our grasp. The Council, in its desperation to regain control, sent a massive fleet to blockade Lystra. It was a show of strength, a final attempt to remind us of their power, but they underestimated how far we were willing to go. Instead of engaging them head-on, we did something far more devastating. We turned Lystra's sun into a weapon, using Vanguard's new gravity manipulation technology to destabilize its core. For hours, the Council watched in horror as the star began to destabilize, its energy increasing exponentially, its surface writhing with violent solar flares. They tried to stop us, but it was too late. We didn't just control Lystra, we controlled the entire system, its sun now a ticking bomb in the heart of their territory. The shock wave from the sun's instability caused a ripple effect, devastating nearby systems and sending a clear message we were no longer interested in negotiations. We weren't just a force to be reckoned with. We were a storm, a chaos that even the Galactic Council could not contain. From that day forward, every race, every government understood the stakes. Humanity had crossed the line. We were no longer a fledgling species in need of protection or guidance. We were the reckoning that would sweep through the galaxy, reshaping everything in our path. The universe, once so full of hope and order, had become something else entirely, a place where the strongest would rise and the weakest would fall. And humanity? We had no intention of being anything but the strongest. The universe had never seen a conflict like this. What started as a simple rebellion against the Galactic Council quickly transformed into something far more monumental. The war we were fighting wasn't just about territory, resources, or dominance. It was about a new order, one where humanity would not just exist among the stars, but would shape the very future of the galaxy. As the battles raged on, it became clear the Council was not just trying to contain us, they were trying to suppress us. They didn't want to coexist with us, they wanted to control us, to dictate our place in the universe. And that was something we could never accept. The stakes grew higher with every engagement. It wasn't just the Council we were fighting anymore. It was every species, every faction that had allied themselves with the old order. One by one, they came at us, trying to halt our progress. The Kithar, in their quiet and elegant way, sent their fleets to harass us, their telepathic commanders trying to break our minds before they broke our ships. The Lornathi, brutal and unrelenting, struck with swarming numbers, thinking they could overwhelm our defenses with sheer force. But they didn't understand the one thing that had always set humanity apart: we adapted faster than they could strike. For every strategy they developed, we found a counter. For every new weapon they unveiled, we created something more devastating. The Vanguard, once our only ship of war, was soon joined by a fleet of human-made warships, each one more advanced, more dangerous than the last. We had learned to harness the resources of entire star systems, mining asteroids for materials to build our growing armada, forging alliances with species who saw our power and feared what would happen if they resisted. Some joined us for the promise of shared dominion. Others, out of sheer desperation, sought refuge beneath our banner. The real battle wasn't fought in space. It was fought in the minds of those who had never imagined humanity could rise to such power. Every victory we won sent ripples through the galaxy. Rumors spread, stories began to take shape. The galaxy that had once viewed humanity as nothing more than a fledgling species, wild, unpredictable, a footnote in the vastness of space, was now watching us with a mixture of awe and terror. We were no longer just survivors of a war-torn planet. We were the force that would change everything. At first, the neutral systems tried to remain aloof, unwilling to choose a side. But neutrality had a price, and soon enough we made them understand that remaining neutral was not an option. Our fleets began to encircle key trade routes, cutting off access to essential resources, forcing systems to take a side or face destruction. No one was safe. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's capacity for both innovation and destruction, and now, as the war escalated, even the farthest reaches of space began to feel the weight of our power. The Council, though, still held a semblance of control. Their fleets were battered, their strategies failing, but they weren't ready to fold. They called upon their greatest weapon, the ancient defense grid that surrounded their capital system, a network of massive artificial satellites designed to repel any fleet, any attack. They thought it would be enough. But we were already planning our next move. We weren't foolish enough to underestimate the power of the defense grid, but we knew something they didn't. Humanity had always thrived on creative thinking, on finding loopholes, on seeing solutions that others couldn't. While the Council's fleet scrambled to fortify its defenses, we used that very time to strike where they least expected, at their communications, at their command centers, cutting off their ability to coordinate. We didn't just want to defeat them, we wanted to destabilize them, to take away their ability to fight back. The final blow came not from a single warship or a fleet, but from 1,000 points of attack. Our forces, spread thin across the galaxy, converged on the Council's capital, hitting every vulnerable point with precision. They had relied too heavily on their technology, their vast fleets, their carefully constructed order, and in the end, it was that very order that betrayed them. Humanity didn't need a single stronghold, a single fortress, to win the war. We needed only our will to be unbroken, our ingenuity, our sheer drive. The Council fell in a matter of days, their once mighty fleet scattered like leaves in a storm, their systems crumbling under the weight of coordinated strikes from every direction. Their leaders, who had once believed themselves to be the galaxy's rulers, now faced the reality that they were nothing more than the first casualties in a much larger struggle. The galaxy, once unified under the Council's authority, now stood in pieces, waiting for the dust to settle. The war was far from over, but humanity had already proven one undeniable truth: the universe had underestimated us, and it would never make that mistake again. The fall of the Council was only the beginning of humanity's transformation. With their capital systems shattered and their fleets in disarray, the galaxy lay open, ripe for reorganization. But it wasn't just about taking their place at the top. Humanity needed to reshape the very fabric of galactic politics, to redefine what it meant to wield power. The galaxy had been ruled by old, crumbling alliances, by species that had grown complacent with peace and order. We were the disruptors now. We didn't just want to be rulers, we wanted to be the architects of a new era, an era defined by human ideals, by our vision of the universe. The immediate aftermath of the Council's fall was chaos. Factions scrambled to fill the power vacuum left in their wake, each species eyeing potential allies or trying to carve out a new sphere of influence. The once glorious Galactic Council had crumbled, but its legacy lingered in the form of treaties, regulations, and power structures that no longer held meaning. The neutral systems, which had long been the foundation of the Council's strength, began to fracture. Trade routes became contested, and old grievances bubbled to the surface. The galaxy had never been as fragile as it seemed beneath the surface. Humanity, however, was ready for the challenge. We didn't just fight wars, we built alliances, forged new systems of governance, and imposed order where there had once been none. The first few years were brutal. We didn't hesitate to suppress any who threatened the new order we were establishing. Those who resisted, those who tried to maintain the old ways, were dealt with swiftly. Our fleets moved with ruthless precision, dismantling old power structures, silencing any attempt at rebellion. There were no half measures now. If we were going to reshape the galaxy, we couldn't afford to let anyone stand in our way. But even in the face of our unrelenting drive, not everyone accepted humanity's new order. The Kithar, once staunch allies of the Council, began to form their own resistance, believing that the galaxy's peace would be shattered by our domination. They thought us too young, too reckless to hold power. Their fleets grew bolder in their strikes against human territories, attacking colonies and trade routes with increasing frequency. But humanity had learned well from our victories. We were no longer the disorganized force we had once been. Our fleets were more advanced, our tactics more refined. Each encounter with the Kithar only served to strengthen our resolve and refine our methods. We didn't just win, we adapted. And the galaxy had never seen a species so capable of adapting. At the same time, the Lornathi, those brutal, insectoid warriors who had allied with us early on, became both allies and rivals. They admired our strength, but their hunger for dominance began to outpace our own. As their armies grew, and their generals began to vie for influence within our growing empire. At first, it seemed like a natural alliance. But as time went on, it became clear that their vision of galactic order didn't align with ours. They were willing to conquer and burn, to leave a trail of destruction in their wake. Humanity, however, wanted something more lasting. We didn't just want to control the galaxy, we wanted to build it. Our vision was one of stability, of progress, not of endless conflict. It was only a matter of time before the cracks began to show in our alliance with the Lornathi. Disputes broke out over territories, over resources, over the future of our empire. The Lornathi saw their growing power as a rightful claim, something they believed we had denied them. Their generals, once loyal allies, now plotted behind closed doors. The inevitable war between our two factions began to take shape. Despite the brewing conflict, we continued our expansion. New systems fell under human control, their once independent populations now subject to the new order we imposed. We built our cities, we forged our alliances, and we took our place as the dominant power in the galaxy. But there was always the underlying tension. Even in victory, there was an awareness that our hold on power was not absolute. It was fragile, like a web stretched too thin. We had won battles, yes, but the true test lay ahead. The Kithar were still a threat. The Lornathi were turning against us, and there were countless factions, small but persistent, that had never been fully suppressed. But we were no longer the inexperienced species that had first launched into the stars. We were the creators of a new order, and the universe was learning that we would not be so easily undone. Humanity's place in the galaxy was not a given, it had been earned through blood and fire. And as the factions continued to rise and fall, one thing was certain: no one would ever be able to ignore us again. We weren't just players in the galactic game. We were the ones setting the rules, and the galaxy would either bend to our will or be torn apart trying to resist. In the wake of the Kithar and Lornathi rebellions, the galaxy had become a fractured, unstable place. Even after humanity's victory over the Council, our dominance was not a simple thing to maintain. It wasn't just the armies or the fleets that needed to be controlled, it was the hearts and minds of billions across 1,000 worlds. The galaxy had known peace under the Council's rule, but that peace had been a brittle thing, held together by the fear of retribution. Under humanity's new order, that peace was now an illusion, and those who still clung to the old ways weren't the only ones who resented it. Every system we conquered, every world we absorbed came with its own complexity, its own resistance. And yet we pressed on, expanding further, shaping the galaxy into a reflection of humanity's own vision. The true test of humanity's power wasn't in our fleets or our technology. It wasn't in the warships we controlled or the weapons we wielded. The real challenge lay in the governance of the new empire we had built. How could we hold such a vast expanse of space together when its inhabitants were still so varied, so deeply entrenched in their own histories and cultures? How could we keep the galaxy from falling into chaos when so many saw our rise as a threat, as an imposition of a new human-dominated order? The first few years of peace after the fall of the Council had been tenuous at best. We had tried to maintain the illusion of diplomacy, the semblance of a stable, unified empire. But the truth was that the galaxy didn't want to be united. Too many species, too many factions, still saw themselves as independent. They didn't want human rule, they wanted their own autonomy. We could no longer afford to play the role of a benevolent ruler, holding the galaxy together with promises of cooperation. It was time to impose a new reality. The changes were gradual at first, subtle. We began to introduce human ideals into every corner of the galaxy. New laws, new systems of governance. The old galactic hierarchies were dismantled, replaced by human-led councils, appointed not by diplomacy, but by strength. In every system, a new order took shape, one where human influence reached further than anyone had anticipated. Some species accepted it, begrudgingly others resisted violently. But we did what humanity always does: we adapted, we evolved, we fought back against resistance until it was no longer a threat. The final blow to the old system came when we launched the Galactic Convergence Initiative. A network of communication hubs, spanning the galaxy, was established under human control, linking every star system, every world, to a central hub of power. This was the new heartbeat of the galaxy, a vast, interconnected web that we controlled. It wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological one. Once every system was linked to our core, once every species knew that their every action could be watched, measured, controlled, the rebellion that had been simmering beneath the surface began to falter. Those who resisted us were forced to do so in the shadows, their power chipped away by the omnipresent gaze of the human empire. Yet, despite all of our success, there were cracks. Not in the system, not in the empire, but in humanity itself. The very drive that had pushed us to the stars, the hunger for dominance, for power, began to take its toll. The leaders who had risen to the top of our new order, the architects of this empire, started to argue over how it should be shaped. Some wanted to maintain the original vision of humanity's rise, a fairer, more just system, one built on the ideals we had espoused when we first began our campaign. Others saw power as an end in itself, believing that strength alone would hold the galaxy together. Factions grew within humanity itself, and as the empire expanded, so did its internal divisions. Outside of our empire, the remnants of the old council still lingered, scattered but not broken. The Kithar, despite their defeat, continued to harbor their resentment, building their own alliances in the shadows. The Lornathi, although subdued, still waited for the right moment to strike again, and even among the neutral systems, those who had once sought refuge in humanity's rise now began to question their allegiance. They feared that in our hunger to remake the galaxy, we had lost something essential: the compassion, the curiosity, the understanding that had once driven us. They feared that we had become just another empire, cold and calculating, ruled by the very forces we had once rebelled against. We were left with a question that no one could answer: what happens when a species that once fought for freedom becomes the very thing it once despised? Would we rule the galaxy with an iron fist, or would we find a way to reshape it into something truly new, something better? The galaxy was ours, but at what cost? The dangerous truth was that the universe had underestimated us, and now, as we stood at the pinnacle of our power, we had to ask ourselves whether we had become something more terrifying than the Council ever was. In the end, we were still human. And that, for better or worse, was the only thing that mattered.